Alright, this is going to be a bar chart race, my first one in a while that I've put out. A few things going on here. One, there is a prior rating. This is from past tournaments where you ended in past tournaments before the rebirth. So, yep, I start with an inflated score. So it goes. You might notice that other people gain more rating than I do, and you might think, maybe they were underrated compared to me. That's fair. Totally reasonable adjustment. So looking at how much people gained or lost from where they started is important. Though note, the higher you start, the higher the expectation is, and the harder it is to gain further rating. The second caveat I would like to make, or the second thing I'd like to note, is if someone doesn't compete for about 5 tournaments, this is minor tournaments like weeklies and stuff, they will drop off the leaderboard. So this is going to basically be a measure of active players. There are some players that so consistently get back to playing that they might miss 5, but they probably play the next 10. Like, I probably don't drop them from the leaderboard, but a bunch of names you see here at this first rating, you might think, that player didn't play very much in the return, and indeed they will drop off the list. So my first note is we have starting ratings. My second note is people drop off the list. And my third and final note is, or my third thing, I guess I have 4. My third is this is all like open-ish tournaments. So CTs are what I call the weekly opens. This also includes, of course, major tournaments. Those are given double importance for how much your rating changes. So Triad Wars, SEs, TTAC, some other player-run tournaments like Piggyman's Proving Grounds, I think will show up here. And what else do we got? I'm sure there's some other stuff in there. It'll say at the bottom. Oh, Clan League. Clan League is also given double credit as a major event. Yeah, so it's just chronological order as ratings change over time. My final note is I'm only showing the top 15 ratings, and that's because I think we have a very weird system for ELO, which is to say most events that are played are things like the weekly opens. And generally the weekly opens will have like 6 of the top 10 players on the site playing them. They're very, very strong. And this means for good players that aren't the like Delials of the world, you are very likely to lose most of your games. Now, what is ELO rating? I should probably say that. I've explained ELO many times, but I like to think of ELO as win percentage adjusted for opposition. You gain points when you win, you lose points when you lose. But if you beat, say, Akiyama, you gain more points than if you had beaten someone lower rated. If you lose to Akiyama, you lose fewer points than if you had lost to someone lower rated. So you could win 90% of your games, but if you're only playing weaker opponents, you won't gain as much rating points as if you're beating the very best. And I think it is a nice system for, in a single number, giving you info on what rate are they winning and who are they doing it against. Sorry if you heard my phone beeping there. So back to my point. If most of the games are between the top 6 or so, ELO is a zero-sum system. So if Delial faces Sir Smokes, the net gain or loss for them will be the same. If Smokes wins, he gains the same number of points Deli loses, and vice versa. So it is zero sum. So if the best are just playing each other, they may move around in relation to each other, but their total number of points, stop messaging me, their total number of points will stay the same. Now, what happens if those players are really, really good and in fact further ahead of the field than their ratings suggest? Then they will keep taking points whenever they play people other than each other. And those people will continually lose rating. And the effect you're going to have is, let's say there's 2 players. One is a complete noob. They show up, they lose a couple games, they leave. The other is a really quite good player that also consistently loses to Akiyama and Delial. What's going to happen is the noob will get your starting rating of 2,000, they'll lose a little bit from that rating, and then they'll leave. But their rating will be between 2,000 and like 1980 because they won't lose that much. The player that plays a bunch and is a better player who very occasionally can sneak wins when the noob cannot will generally lose more points because the more games you play, the more the rating can catch up to where you are, and the new player will not play enough. So I guess my point is, I think ELO does a good job of differentiating between the top tier, but because our tournaments are elimination, so the better a player is, the more games they get as examples, and because our other format is also elimination, but also the weekly opens because they have fewer players, is so top heavy, I think it ends up being really poor at differentiating between the players that aren't top tier. So I could definitely give this to the top 20 or 25, but you'd see some weird names and you'd be like, there are names I am not seeing that are definitely better players than these players. Because we don't get significant samples of games between people not on this list against other people not on this list, and thus Elo has a tough time figuring out where those players are in relation to each other. And that's just something it can't do very well. And that's why I sort of cut off the list. But this is to say, my final caveat on this list is you're going to see a lot of the same names, and you'll see them moving around, but you won't see that many of other names breaking in. And I wanted to figure out a way to credit other names, but I just don't think this is a good system for showing other names in relation to each other. It would be if we had league formats where everyone played everyone and we had samples within all strength differentials. This does better when we were running the open GBs. I think those would be a moment that you could do a better job of showing this. But that doesn't happen very often. That's a hard format to do. You just have to find so many more people. I'm not saying we should move to that format. I'm saying it means that the long-term second-tier players are often going to be rated below the short-term players that are much weaker than them. And that means I'm showing the top 15 here because that's about where I think the system works for. Anyways, let's let it run. And it moves around. Bar chart races are fun. You can see different movement. When Seto starts playing, he appears. He's immediately rated very high. Oh, one other thing to note is Elo is essentially win percentage adjusted for opposition. Now, if you don't play a lot, it takes a while to catch up to where you are, but using the prior ratings means it gets there a lot quicker. So someone like Seto can play not that often and quickly be rated very highly. And that's the end. And it's restarting. I'll just leave a screenshot of it at the end. But this means, for instance, say you wanted to compare Seto and Delial. Seto is very slightly higher rated here. I mean, this is a win apart. So this is not some enormous margin. But you could point out that Deli plays a lot more. And you could argue this either of two ways. You could say Deli has more opportunity to raise his rating, which is true. You could also say that to maintain this level over more games is significantly harder than maintaining the level over fewer. You could also argue playing more games helps you stay in form. But I would generally say that if two ratings are very close, I would tend to give the nod to the person who maintained it over more games or maintained it longer. But these are the two premier active players on the site, with Akiyama and Turds, I think, following them pretty closely. I think we have a clear top four at the moment. Metis almost fell off due to inactivity. He's just hanging on. But we have a very strong top four relative to the field, you may notice. And yeah, I think it's a very strong top four. Not much else to say there. Anyways, there's the bar chart race. This is our current active players ratings. And yeah, this is through October 15th. Middle of October. I know I'm publishing this like middle of November, but whatever. And yeah, I think that's all I got. Note that 2000 is the starting rating. It is very hard to maintain 2000. New players coming in will reliably lose points and add to the ratings of other players, but it takes a while for enough of that to happen for the top of the field to be rated as much better than new players as it should be. Yeah, so there's all kinds of difficulties with the system, but all right, there's our final result.